Hey everybody, ronarray here, and leveling new characters through the campaign over and over can be pretty annoying, but there are ways to do it faster and more efficient, which will come in handy when it's time to level up your second characters. That's why in this video I'm sharing some useful tech and tips to help you fly through the acts and melt bosses along the way. With that setup, I've been able to finish campaign in 2 hours 52 minutes in a pretty relaxing manner. And I also prepare the tree for all 6 classes, doesn't matter what you will level. Let's go forward and I will be able to explain the setup and showcase what I used to make that run more comfortable. Also, feel free to subscribe to the channel if you appreciate such breakdowns, and let's go. So now, let's discuss the setup. And at the moment, when you're going to start the game, it's just the best idea to use a Spectral Throw. It doesn't matter what class are you playing, you can just prepare Spectral Throw level 1 for yourself. And at level 1 you also will be able to use Momentum Support and Prismatic Burst. I recommend Tabula Rasa start, so it's just going to be Spectral, Prismatic and Momentum. You don't really need anything else because most of your damage is going to come from Black Heart Rings. They're giving chaos damage to attacks and both are very effective at early game and will help you out with killing enemies pretty fast. So after level 4 you also will be able to add volley support for your Spectral Throw. It's going to give you more projectiles, more damage, and it's just going to feel better in general. And when you will be level 8, you can also add 3 supports just for additional damage, so mostly it's lightning and cold. That way you can just repick your Prismatic Burst and you can repick Momentum too. Instead, you could create a very basic setup that's going to look like that. So like Spectral Throw, added cold, volley support, added fire, added lightning and faster attacks. That's pretty much it. The biggest issue at that point is mana, so I heavily recommend you to constantly repick your mana flask or maybe even use multiple mana flasks. So you will keep playing the Spectral Throw setup up until at least level 24. You're mostly going to get carried by Black Heart Rings, and you can also use Karui Ward. It's going to give you projectile speed, movement speed and projectile damage, so all those stats are very good. So from level 1 you can also use Darkness Enthroned, which giving you 95% increase the effect of Socketed Abyss jewels. And you can get a few basic jewels with additional damage. It could be lightning, it could be cold, it could be fire, any kind of damage jewel. Just make sure there's no level requirement, so it should be pretty low tier. I had only 1 jewel like that because I believe just having Black Heart Rings usually carrying you just fine, considering you're still using Spectral Throw. And as your boots, I recommend to just use 7 League Step. You can repick it to a rare with additional life later on if you feel like the build is going to be a little too squishy in the later acts. However, if you're dungeon fine, I think it should be alright, because I just finished the whole campaign with 7 League Step. As your gloves, from level 15 you can get Flash and Spirit Iron Scale Gauntlets. You don't really need any kind of gloves before that, so you can use any basic rares that you will pick with some armor on it for better survivability. And from level 15 using Flash and Spirit is definitely recommended. So next step is just using the Gold Dream for additional resistances. You can use it from level 1, and you can also get the Corruption for regenerate life to have a highest life uptime. So that setup is going to carry you up to level 24, but there's a very cool trick which is going to make you significantly faster. So the first and probably the most important part for faster leveling is using Brutal Restraint. Brutal Restraint is going to help you out with your flask uptime. So if you're going to place it close to any kind of node, like a big node right here, you're going to get the Traitor. Flask gain 4 charges per empty flask slot every 5 seconds. That's going to help you tremendously with the flask. Doesn't matter what kind of class are you playing. With just Brutal Restraint and the Traitor, you're going to get much better uptime for your flask, especially if you don't have a Mage Blood for leveling, or before you can swap to it if you're going to use Mage Blood later on. So using the Traitor is heavily recommended. And for that, you can just get any kind of Brutal Restraint with Balboa. I recommend to use double flask with about 70% increase effect and gain non-charges during effect. That way you can just equip 2 flasks, you will have 2 open slots. It's going to be 1 later on, and you can just rotate the flask. So you're clicking 1 and you're running faster while duration is up. When it's finished, you're clicking the second one, and first one is receiving charges. So when you will have double open sockets, it's going to be very comfortable for you. However, later on, from level 18, there's a huge damage boost that I definitely recommend to use. It's the Tincture. For the Tincture, you can get it from level 18, especially if the level itself is going to be lower on it. And you can get 129 increased elemental damage with melee weapons. Together with 54% increased melee weapon damage against enemies that are on low life. That Tincture is going to boost your damage significantly, so I recommend to equip it on bosses, or maybe even have it permanently equipped and click it every time when you encounter a rare, boss, or any kind of enemy that you can't just one-shot with your skills. It's going to help you significantly with your damage, and 2 flasks are more than enough. At the start, you can also use a mana flask until you get the Brutal Restraint and some leech on the tree. So talking about the swap. From level 24, you will be able to swap one of the rings to the Hope of All. You can get a corrupted one with additional damage and resistances together with attributes. So I definitely recommend start using it exactly from level 24. At that moment, it's also recommended to swap the body armor too, so from Tabula, you can go to Wild Leather. And right here, you can just use Elemental Heat instead. Elemental Heat, together with something very basic, which will be available at the moment, it's going to be Trinity, the lower level is going to be Elemental Damage, and you can run Elemental Heat itself together with faster attack support, for example. You can still use the Tabula. Later on, you can also add Multi-Strike and Inspiration. They're available from level 38 Multi-Strike and 31 Inspiration. So your basic setup at level 24 should look approximately like that. So, elemental damage, ruthless, Trinity, faster attacks, that's it. And you also will need to unequip Black Heart rings, because since Elemental Heat can do chaos damage, both Black Heart rings is not giving you anything. So swap it only later on when you will have Le Hoop of All instead of the ring. And from level 30, when you can add like a Death Rush, it's going to be even better in terms of speed. As your main movement skill, I recommend Whirling Blades together with Frost Blink, which is pretty basic. And from level 40, you can also get the Utmost. Utmost right now could be pretty cheap if you just aim for increased attack and cast speed. Nothing else matters, so just get like 35 and higher increased attack and cast speed, and you can get it for like 100 chaoses at the moment. So that setup, just with Elemental Heat, finishing up without faster attacks and with Inspiration, is just going to finish the whole campaign with you, because Elemental Heat is a pretty decent skill for running the campaign fast. And as the Watcher's Eye, I recommend to use the Watcher's Eye with non-channeling skills has minus total mana cost while affected by Clarity. It's going to help you significantly with mana as fast as you can get Watcher's Eye into your build. So try to make it as fast as possible too. And from level 35, I heavily recommend to re-pick the jewels as well. So from level 35 there are going to be significant amount of available jewels on the market. Before that there are barely any, but from level 35 there are so many of them. Here I just recommend to get some additional bonus damage to attacks, and you can get a little life, you can get a little resistances, but mostly just damage to attacks. Keep in mind that your fire damage is applied only to fire attack from Elemental Heat, cold to cold, and lightning to lightning. So perfectly getting all three could boost your DPS a little, mostly in terms of stability. And using Foxshade, if you have one available, is definitely recommended as well for additional 30% of movement speed. However, it could be a little too expensive at the moment, especially since there's not a lot of Foxshades on the market, and if you feel like it's not worth it, you can just keep using Tabula's Rasa. And talking about the weapons. For the weapons, at the start, we're using Last Resort Nailed Fist. Those weapons are pretty nice when you're just starting your campaign and going to help you with initial damage. Later on, around level 34, you're going to re-peak to Mortem Morsu. Right here, it's pretty important to get 61 intelligence for it, because that's kinda a pretty big requirement, but they're going to provide additional damage, they're going to provide additional crit chance, and make your life significantly easier. I also recommend to use Assassin's Mark together with Mark on hit support, just for more damage in one of your weapons. So there's an option to go with rare weapons for even more damage, but I believe it's much easier to make it hassle-free and just run Mortem Morsu up until you're finished. And to speed up your leveling, at higher levels, especially around 50 or in the moment when you're falling too far behind from the level location, I recommend to run Omen of Brilliance. Because Omen of Brilliance can give you additional experience after you leveled up for 60 seconds, which should be pretty nice and help you with keeping your level always up. However, if you don't want to spend additional currency, you don't really need to. In terms of auras, I recommend to just run Purity of Elements together with Clarity, just to have your resistances up. You can also add Precision, and if you have a specific Watcher's Eye with movement speed well affected by Grace, you can also add Grace. However, it will be harder to fit in, and pretty often it's just not worth it, so your setup is going to be just Clarity, Purity and Precision. You don't need to level up Clarity much, you can get like only a few levels in, and Purity should be leveled as high as you can get it. Now, let's talk about the tree and what you need to do in the tree. I'm going to leave that path of building in the description so you can check it out. Practically, I have the loadouts for all classes: Duelist, Templar, Witch, Marauder, Shadow and Ranger. I think that setup is working the best when you're starting as close to the right part as possible. So Duelist is pretty good, I think Shadow is pretty good as well because you're starting very close to close. And I believe that Ranger is pretty nice as well. However, it can be done on Witch, because you can just reach to the close right here in decent amount of points. And I think Marauder should be kinda alright for it too, because you can reach to the Duelist part as fast as possible too. I think the biggest issue right here is for the Templar, because Templar takes the longest to reach comfortable part of the tree. However, there's a few tips that I wanted to focus on. First off, it's pretty important to get non-Val Strike skill target one additional nearby enemy. It doesn't matter what kind of tree you're going to use, like Duelist I have it, in Witch I have it right here, but reaching it as fast as possible is usually the goal. Second moment is reaching the traitor as early is also recommended, so it depends where you start in, you're going to use a little different setup to get the traitor up. And next step, which is practically universal, is getting the Leech. I believe that Leech, especially the instant Leech, is helping significantly during the campaign run. Keep in mind that all those setups are pretty squishy, so you will need to be careful in terms of how you playing. So they're not crazy tanky, because most of the items that we are using are uniques. If you want to be tankier, you can replace body armor for a rare later on, losing the movement speed. And you can also replace 7 League Step to a rare as well, just get anything with life here. Those two changes are going to make your character significantly tankier. But if you're playing on hardcore, I would probably change the setup significantly just to be tankier. I believe that Ascendancy can boost your damage, and you can pick any to get some additional bonuses for it if it's your jam. However, you will be able to finish the campaign without picking any Ascendancy at all, or by picking pretty useless points. Thank you very much for watching, and see you next time. Hope your leveling will be alright. ronarray out.